In sports, we're seeing girls who are constantly having opportunities taken away from them. We've watched it recently in the Olympics. Iman Khalif, were we all there for that? Where everybody was raising their hands and saying, I'm pretty sure this competitor has male chromosomes. We were called liars, conspiracy theorists. Come to find out months later, that individual was actually a biological male. What woman could have actually had that slot? And this has happened countless times, as J.K. Rowling lays out in her statement. But what about the girls who do get to compete? And when they are competing, they're competing alongside or against biological males who are clearly, despite what John Oliver has to say, more strong than they are, more powerful than they are. This is actually leading to real harm. We've seen a field hockey player who literally had her teeth hit out of her head after competing against a trans-identified player. We've seen 13-year-olds in a shot put competition who very bravely stood on the sidelines and said, you know what, I will not be forced to compete against a male competitor. What happened to that male competitor? He went on to compete and he won the shot put competition. There are endless examples of this, sort of all starting with the record-breaking Leah Thomas, who was ranked, in the 400s amongst male swimmers, became a female through, the waving of a wand, and was suddenly number one amongst female swimmers.
Hello. Once again, I'm late. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, this time it was all my doing. I think it was, honestly, I could give you the play-by-play, and then I can tell you what I think happened, because as I mentioned yesterday, and I've been mentioning for a couple weeks now, I think, I've been looking forward to Stalker 2 coming out for a while now, and I don't know, this doesn't really have anything to do with it. I just, I started the download first thing this morning because it was, it didn't come active until about 8 o'clock or so. And I didn't particularly get a lot of sleep, but I slept a little while last night. Didn't think it would be an issue. It normally isn't. If I don't get a full night's sleep, I'll just pass out at some point and take a nap during the day. But anyway, by the time I got done with the download, it was something like an hour or so later. It was, or maybe a little bit more, about an hour and a half. It's like 9:30 or so. And let me see. All I remember is that I was trying to set the video settings, and I was getting really tired. Like, I wasn't even able to focus on the text on the screen. I'm like, what the hell? Why am I getting so drowsy? So tried opening a Monster, tried drinking some caffeine, tried, just turning the volume, just tried a bunch of stuff. Nothing was working. And I was like, well, you know what? If I'm feeling this way, I better just try and focus on the show, make sure that I get all this stuff ready. And lo and behold, somewhere along the line, I ended up just passing out. And I have no idea why. It was very, because like I said, the day before, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I think, just honestly, the only thing I can say is that it's been not so much of an issue yet, but I have noticed in the last week or so, maybe just this week, starting on Monday, that because of, the last job I had was tattooing, as I've talked about before, and for that kind of job, you don't really need to wake up early. You don't usually open a tattoo shop until about noon. And even when I had to commute, I still didn't have to wake up until about 10:30-ish. And that was when I was still working. So having an actual schedule where I wake up fairly early, it's been a long time. Because before I tattooed... in my last job before that, it was a long time ago now, because I was tattooing for about 7 or 8 years, and so before that I did have it it was originally 9 to 5. I originally worked full time, but then they 8 to 5, and they knocked me down to part. Well, I first volunteered part-time hours because I was going to school at the time, and then when I wanted to go back to full-time hours, they said they couldn't pay me. They couldn't have another full-time employee on staff. They couldn't afford it, so I was like, okay, fine, whatever. But anyway, the point being that I was still waking up at early hours, but and that's what even allowed me to do the tattooing apprenticeship. But the point is that that was the last time I ever really woke up early to do something in a regular schedule. And since then, I haven't had any kind of schedule, period, after I hadn't been at a tattoo shop. So it's been a few years. And which, yeah, it's pretty bad, I know. But I have been able to get back into it surprisingly well up until this point, and now it just seems like it's finally maybe catching up with me, that I'm still adjusting to that. So not to be like over dramatic about it or anything. I'm just warning you guys, because I don't want this to be the case. I most certainly don't want to be all over the place in terms of when I'm going to be streaming and when you can expect that my show will be up. But just making it a heads up warning now, because if this does come up again, it's potentially going to be likely because of that, more so than something like yesterday where it was more of an emergency type situation. So so really sorry about that, but I really have no idea what the hell happened. I didn't wake up until, oh man, hours later, and it was obviously way past time. But once again, this time I was a little bit more upset. But once again, I was like, yeah, you can't miss the show. You got to do it. So here I am, and here we go. So just ultimately, I'm sorry about that. That's 2 days in a row where I've been late. But as I said, the show must go on. As I said in the description box. So anyway. So today we got one main subject to go over. There was originally two, but this main one was probably going to be the main crux of the discussion today, because it's something that hasn't been in the focus of news lately. It's been a while, at least, just because it was brought up a little bit during the campaign, especially towards the end. But it wasn't brought up much during the campaign on either side, and the only time it was brought up at the mostly towards the end was when it came to sort of the swing voters. And everyone has said for a while now, if you haven't seen the ad that Donald Trump had up for the end of the campaign, it was the transgender ad, which was discussing Kamala Harris's plan for taxpayer-funded sex change operations, and it wasn't just for prisoners; it was also for immigrants, and so basically any group that was either in prison or that shouldn't be here legally were going to be still, if they claimed to be transgender and wanted a sex change operation, they'd be given one at the expense of taxpayers, because we just have to take care of the health. We wouldn't want them committing suicide. There's just this epidemic. This is one argument I've never understood, is especially when it comes to youth and people in schools and things like that. Like, I'm sorry, I haven't noticed this epidemic of kids committing suicide at this super high rate. Could you please point me to the statistics that you're talking about? That you're talking about all these young people committing suicide, and it being because specifically they want to transition but they can't. Like, I've not heard any kind of statistic. If anything, I've heard more, and even this isn't as common because it's not common to be transgender, period. But if anything, it's been people who have had transitioned and regretted it and committed suicide. That actually has been consistently shown, I don't know about amongst just kids, but amongst anyone who transitioned, at the bare minimum, the rates don't change in terms of suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, or the actual act of attempted suicide, or successfully attempting suicide. And it's not really like, it's not anything to be happy about, obviously. It's just that what I think obviously is happening is that this is not the kind of care that these people need. Especially when it's so heavily encouraged by modern cultural norms to just lazily slap that designation on someone who may be experiencing gender dysphoria. It's like, well, that must be it. You're transgender. Let's get you on hormones and get that surgery scheduled, because these are things that you should. I've heard talks from transgender individuals who transitioned and don't regret their decision, and almost to the letter, to almost every single individual that has said this, they've been people who went through a long process with a healthcare practitioner and a psychologist that both spent significant time discussing their condition, discussing the options, finally landing on that being what they wanted to do, and it's still taking a long time before it actually gets to the procedure of, transitioning this person physically. So those are the times when it's actually seems to be something that people consider that, yeah, that was the right decision for me. But because this topic has become so controversial, because people seem to want to just shout all this stuff in the name of transgender people, which, by the way, this is mostly not even aimed at transgender people, or at least people who genuinely are suffering from gender dysphoria. It's aimed at people who are the activists and the leftists who can't shut up about it because they want to show how virtuous they are. It's become far more of a trend for these people to try to give themselves these virtue points that, like, I'm a trans ally. I'm an ally to trans people. I support trans people. Okay, that's great. Do you really, do you know what you're talking about? Do you know anything about, you already convinced enough people worldwide to start doing real significant damage to a lot of people. So, I mean, are you sure this is what you want to be promoting? It's just, it's become something that is, luckily now it's starting to finally get to a point, because this is why I mentioned the ad with Donald Trump's campaign, and it's gotten to a point where, there's been, I can't remember the law, but there was a law passed by Congress that had to do with abortion originally, but I think it also applied to other types of medical procedures, including transgender surgeries and such, that would not be funded by taxpayers because of the potential that it would be against the religious beliefs of people required to pay taxes for this sort of procedure. So these things wouldn't be covered by someone's basically anything that taxpayers pay into, like Social Security, Medicare, or something like with like Obamacare or whatever, like things like this that would typically not be included because they would be considered to be essentially, they would, most people that are religious people would definitely not want their tax dollars to be going to something like that. Well, originally the abortion community had kind of wormed their way around that by putting up Planned Parenthood as a small business and using the PPP loans that were given out during the pandemic for relief for small businesses. to receive government funds to help keep their business going. Now, Planned Parenthood is by no means a small business, but they're claiming to be, because they were claiming to be this, like they technically have been listed as a nonprofit before. They've typically been able to suggest for other circumstances that they are a small business, but when it came to these loans in particular that were all, non, they didn't need to be paid back. They were directed because of the pandemic towards small businesses that were experiencing a lot, which I don't think Planned Parenthood had any issue in that regard. I think that that was one of the services, I'm sure, that wasn't slowing down during the pandemic, because, of course, we want to make sure people can get to sex change operations. But Rand Paul discussed this with someone. It was someone that was a representative of Planned Parenthood. She was trying to mention that she was trying to use that same excuse that they're not a big business, they're a small business, and so Rand Paul has been asking, and other members of Congress have been asking for the documentation that they had to file that proved that they were a small business and were qualified for these loans, and they'd been refusing to provide the documents, and once again they refused to provide them. I don't think they ever did, and hopefully, at some point there'll be, at least with the new majority on both sides, there'll be some kind of accountability for the the huge sums of money Planned Parenthood got during because the loans were fairly decent sized loans, and they were dependent on the size of the business, as long as they still qualified as a small business. But there's some weird reason why there's always been this exception for Planned Parenthood, and it's because, of course, the real reason being Democrats want to make sure that people can get abortion even if they are very light in their pocket, shall we say. And it's just more obsession with abortion. But when it comes to transgender surgeries, that was one where there hadn't been even any talks whatsoever. There's no agreements by any group of people that sat down and said, yeah, this is something that will be something that is covered by this policy or that type of tax credit or whatever, because obviously the controversial nature would mean that at the bare minimum, okay, we have these surgeries, we shouldn't force taxpayers to pay for it. Well, not only has taxpayers been required to pay for it, but in this state, in California, where everyone went loopy until just recently, apparently, I guess, because I just looked at the map again, and it seems like it was even more red in the center than I thought, which, once again, I'm very, very proud to be part of that red center, but especially in the Southern California and coastal regions, there's all blue all throughout the whole area, and that's where the major population centers are, especially in the Southern California area. But excuse me. The thing here that is really even more egregious is that I'm not sure if this is restricted to a single group of counties or if it's single areas that have voted on it or what, or if it's the whole state, and that would be a nightmare. But apparently there was enacted a policy where if a if someone under the age of 18, a minor, claims to be transgender and their parents are not seeking gender affirming care, that ridiculous term that is so Orwellian, it's ridiculous, but there's this law that's been enacted that's essentially in place to say, okay, if you're a parent and you're not providing gender affirming care to your child, the state can come and take your child and put them into a home that will that will affirm their gender and provide them the care they need. And this is like, so this is, and there's been some stories that have come out, because I think Canada enacted the same policy, at least in some of the provinces. I'm not 100% sure on where, but I have heard this policy enacted in a handful of places. And the places it has been enacted, that's where you find a suicide rate that's increased, like because mothers have come out just horrified, fathers have come out horrified that their kids have been removed from their care, where they knew that, okay, no, my child is not experiencing any kind of condition where they're going to need puberty blockers, or they're going to need hormones, or they're going to need any kind of surgeries. Most definitely, they're going to need some serious mental health counseling, but they most certainly don't need any kind of drugs that are going to change their biology forever, or a procedure that will essentially butcher them. And that's not what they need. And it's gross. It's absolutely disgusting. But so to go back to Trump's ad, this is just one example of things that are going way too far, along with the things with illegal immigrants and with prisoners, to the point that, okay, you're pushing too far now. This is going too far, and people are starting to take notice, and they're not just like going to have that, well, live and let live attitude once it's something that you're forcing onto people in this regard. They're going to get angry. And when they get angry, they're going to make sure that you know that they're angry, because they're not going to just sit by and take this idly. And they didn't, and that's one major reason. A lot of people have said that ad, which it basically culminated in it saying Kamala is for they them, Trump is for you, and it really had an impact with people that weren't as in tune with what's been going on recently, as some of the more politically involved people have been aware of for a while now. And that was said to be so effective, it was enough to pull, like, I think 3% of the vote, over of the swing vote that was still open, over to Trump's side, because and I heard this analogy and it sounded like, yeah, that makes sense. So if you're someone who is completely unaware of what's happening, and you see this sort of ad, and you like find out, oh my God, and you hear more about it, you start recognizing what's going on. If you go to vote and you're thinking, you're not sure, and you go and you're like, and it's the last thing you're thinking about, well, yeah, if I vote for Kamala, though, what's going to happen with this situation with transgender people? That am I going to be paying for all this? Is this going to be something I'm going to be forced to be involved in? And it's like, I think that would have been like, something that would have been tugging on someone's conscience at the voting booth, to the point that if they really had some sort of conflict and they couldn't make the decision, that it would be something it would definitely be like, nah, I just can't do it. I just can't vote for that. So at the bare minimum, they may not have voted for anybody at all. At best, maybe they were like, I got to vote for Trump because I can't let this sort of thing go. Because, make no mistake, that's what would have happened, and probably a lot more, because this is just the stuff that we know about. And there was that hospital that was doing all this transgender affirming care, gender affirming care on minors, and they're trying to keep it secret. And someone in the group was keeping record of all this and making sure that they had evidence to go along with it, and they really captured some serious, like, breaches of doctor-patient sort of trust, and and essentially made it so that like there was no question at all. These people were violating. I know it was in Texas because that was where there had been Greg Abbott had come out and made sure he made a really large and like statement that would be heard across the entire nation that Texas is not a place where we're going to allow gender affirming care on minors. So that was when there was basically the sort of law put in place in Texas specifically that was like, we're banning this entirely for anyone under 18. And this hospital that was still performing them was trying so hard to come off as not doing anything that was going to be breaking the laws, while at the same time they're having Zoom calls where this sort of thing was being discussed about how we can do this, how we can do that, and this is how we'll keep it, under wraps and da-da. And so luckily somebody actually did get that information out, and the hospital got shut down. But or at least the people that were offending got. I think the whole hospital did get shut down though. But either way, the point is that like once it gets to a certain level, people get angry, and things are they're gonna call for an end to it. And but I think the problem is that as we saw what the Texas said, this group of people are very immoral, to say the least, and they don't mind. What the results are. They're basically willing to use a generation of children and of even adults or young adults, older people, whoever it might be, to push because if I don't know if you know this or not, but we'll set the record straight here that any medication that is supposedly used for puberty blockers or just the puberty blockers. The cross-sex hormones are usually more something that is just like a steroid for people with certain types of cancers. But when it comes to the puberty blockers, those are usually for children with cancer, actually, like they're not meant to. None of them are used on label is basically what the point is. Like, and as a matter of fact, they're not kidding. There's some people that refer to them as chemical castration because, in large part, that's true. Yes, that's what they do. They over time are responsible for essentially rendering someone's genitalia completely useless and without sensation at all. And it's what they give some of the most egregious sex offenders in prison because of their dangerous tendency to be a sort of predator that they don't want to perform physical castration. They give them these drugs to chemically castrate them and make sure that they're not a danger to anybody around them. And that's the kind of drugs that they're giving to kids to affirm their gender. Like it's disgusting. It's absolutely, completely beyond anything that we should have ever, like, as a society, decided, yeah, that sounds reasonable. There's nothing about that sounds reasonable. So none of these drugs are used on label. They're all used off label, and none of them have been through any kind of clinical tests or anything to see if they're effective for their purpose that they're being stated to be for. And it's causing so many different unknown side effects that are popping up here and there. Like, if you've seen Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman, there is a section towards the end where this female who transitioned to male shows this section of arm that was used for skin grafts for basically to create a fake penis, and he was stating how that has led to so many complications that essentially it's going to kill him because of this this sort of infection that had sprung up based on the skin graft, and the complication rate is through the roof. I mean, that's why, and it boils down to one thing that can't really be denied, that a lot of these places that are doing this are doing it because once they get someone in there and have them under the belief that this is what's wrong with me and this is what will help me get better, they become sort of locked in a state because of the complication rate that they will need to keep coming back and coming back and coming back for more and more procedures and more work, more and more drugs, more and more whatever. And they're just making, in fact, they even broke down the amount of money that each person at this age group is worth in terms of average total money that would need to be spent on this person based on their projections and based on past patients who have the symptoms that they've been suffering from post operation or post medication or whatever, and it's just like that. So that's obviously the motivation is profit margin of a lifelong necessary patient for some sort of ridiculous care that is never been really studied at scale. This first generation that's ever had anything like this that was recorded in any kind of way that was with modern technology, and there's still not enough data by far to ever really say anything definitively that would be something encouraging for someone to hear. Any kind of statistic that is encouraging is usually either made up or it comes with a caveat, like this may be true, but it's like there's always a catch to something, even if there's an upside to it. And one of the most disgusting things that is said is the suicide sort of statistic idea that because of not being affirmed, that these people are just committing suicide. And once again, as I said, show me the statistic where all of a sudden in the last 10 years there's been some sort of spike in suicides among young people, especially among young teenagers or even preteens, because it's this is how sick this shit is. But show me the statistic where that's climbed significantly, and show me how that correlates with like as opposed to the pandemic. And because we do know that the pandemic was responsible for a lot of for a rise in depression and anxiety, different mental disorders for young people, especially at the high school age, because they weren't around people their own age. They weren't socializing like they should be at that age, and especially if they'd been going to school already, they were experiencing a massive change from what they'd known their whole lives, for most of their lives up until that point. So this idea that they're all committing suicide if they aren't affirmed, it's like I'm not seeing any statistic that would show that. There's no, and if there was a statistic that showed some sort of psychological disorders or something that was related to transgender people committing suicide at such a high rate if they weren't affirmed, okay, show me where that relates to transgenderism, and that is what, they can't do it. They can't do it because it doesn't exist. And it's just a made-up thing. So when they say, this is the most disgusting part, when they say, well, would you rather have a live transgender child or a dead child that needed this sort of care but didn't get it? And the parents at that point are kind of almost victims themselves, because if you listen to some of the people who really study this, I can't remember her name, but she was she's done a lot of research into the subject. She's been in What is a Woman, and she's been interviewed by Jordan Peterson several times. She's one of the few people who is really counseling not just the kids that are going through this sort of abuse in general, but the parents who are also being abused by the healthcare industry by suggesting that if they don't do this for their children, that their children are going to die, and that obviously to a parent is going to be something that one of the few things that could get you to go along with something crazy. But you hear that from someone you're supposed to be able to trust, a healthcare provider, and it's enough to get some parents to get so frightened that they go along with it, and they don't recognize until after the procedures have started and they notice things probably are getting worse and not better, that wow, wait, this may have been a mistake. And so she counsels a lot of these families, and they're just in agony over this, over these sorts of things. So that whole thing was to preface, because I haven't talked about this on the channel at all. I've not purposely stayed away because of any reason, but just because it's not really been, I mean, this has been, in headlines and news for a long time now, but it just hasn't been a major topic to discuss since I started the channel. Well, lo and behold, here we go. We have reached the day where it's become relevant, because there is the first transgender, openly transgender, I guess, is what they're, I'm sure that would mean at this point in time that they're just transgender, period, because if we're talking about openly transgender or in the closet transgender, I don't think there would have been an issue coming out in the last good while now that would have made someone ashamed to come out. In fact, they would have been shouting it from the mountaintops, especially if there's someone on the left that they are transgender. But now we have our first member of the House of Representatives who is openly transgender, and so yay, let's all throw a big party. Problem is that there's one congresswoman who, if you know her history, you would know that she would have immediately been concerned that this quote-unquote woman who was once a man and now is identifying as a woman is going to be probably wanting to use women's only facilities like women's only bathrooms and that whole spiel, and of course was going to have concerns about it because she is vocal advocate for women's rights and women's health, and she was sexually assaulted when she was younger, and it's caused her significant PTSD and other mental issues. And so it's something that she has been very involved in Congress, and now, of course, with this coming in, she was very concerned that you're going to have a individual identifying as female who still has all of their former, we'll say, nether regions intact, and that person's going to want to use the women's bathroom. And she's like, no, you're not. And so there's been a bit of a, well, not a bit. It's gonna probably get fairly ugly, but she's standing up pretty firm on this one, and she's not going to move. And at first, it seemed like Speaker Johnson was not going to really publicly go on the record to say much, but he did come out finally and kind of make a much stronger statement against having this person being allowed into the women's restroom. And the sort of compromise seems to be that they will spend the extra, couple of tens of thousands of dollars to add a we call it a gender neutral bathroom to the facility. And if that's what it takes, fine, we'll do that. I guess it's sort of having to compromise at least to that extent, but that is, at least I agree, preferable to having this person go and essentially, because the problem is that even if you accept the idea that, okay, this person is not going to be a threat to anyone that's in there, once you introduce those policies and they're in place, that becomes the accepted norm for everyone that goes in and out of that building, including people who are visiting, including people that are just happen to be around, including staffers you might not know. Like, tons of people that you have no idea about their background or their history or anything like that, because there's been numerous cases of people that men identifying as female that have either gone into the women's restroom to essentially voyeurism and wanted to either just look or record or whatever perverted bullshit these people get into, just to watch, or what is even worse, this is the thing that happened in Loudoun County with Scott Smith, where his daughter was in high school, freshman, and a boy in a dress went into this restroom where she was and took her into a stall and brutally, and it was bad. It was brutal rape. It was just, there's no other way to describe it. And rather than really do anything serious to this son of a bitch, they just sent him off to another school. Didn't even warn them, didn't tell them anything, just shipped him off to another school. And guess what? He did the same thing there. He blocked a girl in the science room and did the same thing. I don't know what happened after that. I know that something happened, at least. I think that, but these things are, especially going back, a few years when there was more secrecy, there was not as much was known in terms of the data of what's been happening. At that point, I'm sure there was some kind of mild sentence that may have been handed down, but it wasn't going to be some kind of really strict, serious punishment that would be preventative of anything else happening in the future. So, of course, I got some clips to go through, but the point is that that once you start enacting those policies, that means that you lose control over the environment that was once protected for women and women only. And now it's not. Now there's exceptions. And those exceptions extend to anyone because, by the rules of transgenderism that we've all had to, basically adhere to because the science, excuse me, because of this, we've all had to, live by these new rules where, okay, well, that person can be in here because, even a report of a spa where some man was going in saying he was transgender, and a bunch of girls and women were forced to see this guy just undress and just pull out his piece and just be just strolling around the women's spa, and nothing wrong there. I did see a video clip of this woman who came out to the front desk, and she was just pissed. She was furious, and they threw her out. They threw her out for being belligerently angry. Say, I'd be belligerently angry too. Shit, what are you talking about? Like, she's not supposed to get mad when you say this. Yeah, this man can be in there, and she's like, this man's waving his penis around, and that's just fine to be in the women's room. She's completely confused. She's completely furious, and I'm like, hey, tear them up, go for it, because this is ridiculous, and it is ridiculous that that this is a lot, because there's there's so many areas where this is exploited. It's being exploited in prisons where people are like, oh, I identify as female, I want to be put in a female prison. Okay, guess what? All of a sudden, there's reports of rape, and a couple of inmates show up that are pregnant all of a sudden, and who knows what happened there, whether that was consensual or whether that it doesn't matter. Then we also have things like this has been talked about a lot in sports, and this is one example I'll be using today because, as you saw from the intro, there's been serious injuries that have come to people who have attempted, especially when it comes to any kind of contact sport where there's physical encounter involved. But even something like volleyball, there was a recent case of that girl had played volleyball, pool volleyball, I think, or it was high school, and this guy who was on one of the teams jumps up and spikes the ball, hits this girl right in the head. She gets a concussion, and is because the guy's spike was going like 90 miles an hour or some shit. Now, this is ridiculous. You can't just swap these people out. And of course, there's the most infamous case with Leah Thomas, where Leah Thomas was a low-ranked male swimmer, and decided to transition into being a female, and then ended up finishing first place in a bunch of All-American swimming competitions in was it Tennessee, I think, or I think it's Tennessee, maybe, or is it Kansas? I can't remember. I think it was Kansas, maybe, or Tennessee. Either way, there's that case was the one where Riley Gaines gained nationwide recognition for standing up for the rights of female athletes, because she was one of the top-ranked swimmers in the country, really, and at that point, and she had been on the opposing team, and essentially she had came out, and one of the reasons that she was so vocal about it is because she was kind of, I don't know if she was officially like a team captain or anything, but she was at least someone who took charge of a lot of situations. And so when there were all these girls completely upset that this was going on, she was trying to figure out, because they weren't told about this until the day of, that they'd be not only racing against a male, but changing in the same locker room with the male. And one of the things she talked about was that she went out to ask, how is this allowed? Why there's a male in the bathroom, in the locker room, just completely naked, changing in front of all of us. Like, why? How is this allowed? And they just told her that, oh, well, we managed to make the locker rooms unisex. And they said it like it was some sort of achievement that they were able to accomplish this. And it was like, she was just like, she was stunned that they were this excited about the thing. And, I guess now she's far more disillusioned and knows very well exactly what they would be trying to do. But it's just a question of, once again, this might not be something where there was any contact, but she described, people who would have placed high enough to be able to make it to a point where they would be, they would have a college, scholarship because of where they placed. And now, just because they were just knocked out by just one place, that they no longer that was no longer going to be an option for them, and they were just immediately just burst into tears and completely just crushed by the fact that this had happened. And it is completely ridiculous. It's absolutely unfair. There's an acknowledgement when we adopted Title IX that there was a difference between male and female, and that males and females in sport would compete with their own gender. They wouldn't, or with their own sex. I agree that gender needs to be a word that we start moving away from in terms of using it so flippantly, like it's like it has some sort of serious meaning that is so different than it's not. It's just a stand-in. I've always seen the same thing, and it's becoming so out of control that and to even take it one step further from my own experience, one thing I've been noticing lately, this is something you won't hear from a bunch of other places because not many people want to talk about this, but I'll talk about it because I'm kind of getting sick of it. Even in video games now, because as I've said before, I'm a big nerd, so I can talk about this. They are starting to incorporate in games where there's a character creation process where you make a character down to whether it's a man or a male or a female, and what they look like from their face to their bodily attributes, everything. That you would want to, depending on the game, sometimes it's not much, sometimes it's more, but there's some games where every minute detail almost is adjustable, and slowly but surely I've started to see that it started with replacing which sex are you, and then choosing your character to be male or female to which body type are you, and then it would show something that's clearly male or female, but they just changed the wording. It's like, body type, what? And then they started incorporating more things like attempting to like move certain things that are clearly meant for one sex over another, but they have to include all of them now because, like, hairstyles, for example, that used to be separated between the between the character you picked, and it wasn't something anybody made a big deal out of. It was like, unless it was kind of, there's games like that kind of do it for kind of joking purposes that were kind of like would have those options there just to make something crazy or outlandish. But now they have them there as a matter of, we have to make sure that we include this for people to feel included. And so they'll have hair that's clearly like pigtails or twin buns on male characters. It's like, and they just have been going further and further, and it's just gotten to a point now where it's like, why do you even split them up anymore? Just make your nebulous nothing character because it obviously seems like it's like minuscule, and it is in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time it just seems to me like it's further proof of the fact that they're trying to make people adhere to a set of trying to get them to buy into ideology that they don't buy into by force of media being completely on one side of the issue, and it doesn't matter if you think differently. We're going to shove it down your throats. I've just seen, though, that, and one thing that makes me feel better is that once this stuff is integrated into game, like one recent example that was just shoved in everybody's face really badly was the game series called Dragon Age. They just came out with their fourth entry in the series, Dragon Age. I don't even know the name of the freaking subtitle on it. I could probably find it, but I don't know if it's really worth it. Maybe I can find it. Hold on, let me see. Because of course I have my game stuff up, and Stalker 2 came out today, like I said. So, let me see. It's got to be here in the new releases, because it would be there, or at least here. That's strange. Actually, because today that came out. I guess not. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, Dragon Age: The Veilguard. That's what it was. But yeah, it was marketed even. So at least in this case, you knew ahead of time that it was going this far in this direction, but they essentially were making sure that the main character you play as was almost encouraged to be a trans whatever, like trans male or trans female, one or the other. Like they have different races even in the game, and once you get to that point where there's different races, there's different fantasy characters that have all these unusual attributes, and now they're also transgender. So there's conversations, and you can see screenshots in game where they're saying, I use they them pronouns. Are you fucking kidding me? We're going this far now. We're actually making games where we're making sure that your character establishes their pronoun in conversation in game. Wow, we're really going off the deep end on this one, and it's just, once again, like, what's the point exactly? Because where's this giant demographic of because I tell you, I saw a huge amount of backlash to it, and I'm surprised. I think people just gave it a chance, and that's why it's not as terrible as it would be, because the game itself, the gameplay looked fairly good. It has a studio behind it that is pretty skilled at making games, but the company that publishes it is very, very, let's say, based on the sort of activist class of people that really don't give a shit about about the game's legacy, or a series is the legacy of a series and how long it's been going on, because they've been even incorporating this type of shit in older games that they've been remaking or remastering for more modern gen technology, so that even if you played a game that was from the mid 90s and you were to buy a game or a version of it now that is cleaned up and it's in high definition and it can work on more modern computers. Great example is Wasteland 1. They did that to the Wasteland Remastered Edition. All of a sudden there was and in this case, since there's not as elaborate of a character creation process, they just refer to all characters as they, them. Or at least your character, for sure, they refer to him as they, them. I don't know. I've only seen enough screenshots, and I've played the original a little bit. I was more interested in the sequels when they came out, but this is just another example, of course, where it's a studio that owns the rights and is just changing those things on the fly as they go because they want. That's what I don't understand, though, because that game got bombed to hell once it came out altered. People did not like that, and so especially in cases where there's alterations to existing games, that's where really it draws a lot of negative attention. But even in the case of newer games like the new Dragon Age, it's like, the only reason that is even in question and on the table is because it's an established existing property that has been well received for every entry so far, and they want it to be an entry in the series that is more, it actually addresses these things so that people will be more interested to buy it. And I just look at it and go, like, there's a lot of people I saw that were completely like, I'm not buying this game at all, period. For a while there, it was completely flooded with like, I'm not getting this. No, I'm not going to play this. And it just seems like there is a flaw, a flawed sort of, I won't say flawed. I'll say there's a tendency amongst people who play video games, and especially people who are real long-time fans of certain genres or certain titles, that they will go out and protest and talk about how much they don't like this, and at the same time they'll go and buy the game, and they don't want to talk about it, but they'll buy it and they'll play it, because they just, because the worst part is that a lot of times in these sequels in gaming, it comes on a cliffhanger, or it comes on the heels of the last game where it was just not a satisfying ending, and you just wish that there was more, and they finally announced there's something new coming out, and then you see all this shit in it, and you're like, meh. And the only reason I wasn't as tempted is because I was not as big a fan of the last game as most people were, so it didn't really bother me too much. I was like, okay, well, never mind that then. But to someone who is probably a little bit more hardcore of a fan for all three of the entries in the series, they very well may have hated this idea. Like they might have completely despised the fact they were doing it, but just felt like I just gotta see what happens, and that contributes to the problem because obviously they think that's fine. And there hasn't been much of a pushback at all in the gaming industry. There's barely even been any attention in the gaming industry for this sort of thing. But yeah, that's just and only in small pockets, like with developers that are a little bit more tuned into the culture. And like, there's been controversies that have come up where the developers made a joke about misgendering a character, and then they'll get mobbed by. Now this was pre-Elon Twitter, so that made more sense. But I haven't heard of anything like that happening since. But anyway, that was a huge tangent that I only went off on because, like I said, I haven't heard anybody bring this up, and likely because nobody in the media is as big of a nerd as I am that's into more typical Capitol Hill United States politics, and also into really hardcore into PC and console gaming of any kind, like any real serious gamer got into discussing these issues and putting them side by side. I've heard people discuss the transgender issue on its own. I've heard people discuss transgender issue in gaming, and that be from somebody who only really covers gaming related information. So throwing it alongside it, I just figured I would be uniquely positioned to be able to do that because I've just been watching this slowly creep more and more and more into stuff. And now, luckily, another advantage I have is that, as I've said before, also I'm also a big nerd, so I like a lot of Japanese IP and a lot of games that specifically have been Japanese developed for the entire series, and it doesn't seem to have gripped that part of the world, or really almost any other part of the world, as much as it's gripped the United States and Western culture. But it still rears its head in releases that completely throw me off guard that I never would have guessed would be entries in that way. But yeah, so it's just to kind of show that it's been slowly being incorporated into just about every form of media that we have, and unfortunately, I don't think there's any way that it's going to go away like completely in any real way anytime soon, because even if you were to get a mass consensus on something, it's going to find a new home in this corner or in that corner, and then it's going to kind of take root and try to spread more influence in these more segregated areas where it's not necessarily going to get the attention of the wider population at large. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. But it is depressing that. Once again, I mean, body types. Come on, really. That's what we're. I mean, you could say I've seen other cases where they use the words masculine or feminine, and at least in that regard, it's honest. It's like you're not using male or female, but and especially unless it's something like really where there's where it's an adult rated game, or there's a more edgy, mature rated game. There's usually not really much spotlight on, I guess we'll say the genitalia of every character in the game. But the games where there's romance that develops across the game, or where there's some more type of mature themes involved, where you'll have characters that at least imply certain details about sexual activities or whatever it is that they decide to go, whatever details they try to throw in. But anyway, so I was going to show at least a clip from Nancy Mace and was that this, or was it well, let's just start with this one. I think this is the one that has everything in it. I had one main clip I wanted to show, and I think this is it. And I didn't realize I'd already spoken for so long. But this is Megyn Kelly's coverage of the actual. And I'm sure you know who Megyn Kelly is, but if you don't really watch her show very often, she's one of the most extremely outspoken people about this issue, and is very, very passionate to make sure that we do everything possible to defend especially children, but even when it comes to adults, women need to be protected, and they need to feel safe when they go in a place where they're going to feel potentially vulnerable. And so this is Megyn Kelly's response to this situation in Congress, and it's pretty much spot on. It hits every note you would need to hit. And so we'll go ahead and pull that up right now and have a response to that. Okay, there we go. All right. So yeah, there we go. Oh, and I just realized something. Here, I'll start this up, and then we'll talk on the other end, but hold on just a second. Let's go ahead and start this, and I forgot
Speaker
something.
Johnson was asked a bit about it. Here's what he said.
There we go.
Is this the first one? I think he gave the original, yeah, and then he tried to clean it up. 6 first.
Is freshman-elect Sarah McBride a man or a woman?
Look, I'm not going to get into this. We welcome all new members with open arms who are duly elected representatives of the people. I believe it's a command that we treat all persons with dignity and respect. We will, and I'm not going to engage in silly debates about this. There's a concern about uses of restroom facilities and locker rooms and all that. This is an issue that Congress has never had to address before, and we're going to do that in a deliberate fashion with member consensus on it, and we will accommodate the needs of every single person.
Okay, you should treat everyone with respect, and you should accommodate their needs, and that includes us. That includes the women. And that means men cannot come in. Get your gender-neutral bathroom. He realized that the Republican Party is not going to have that kind of equivocation anymore, and came out and said this later.
I asked a question this morning at the leadership gaggle, and I rejected the premise because the answer is so obvious. For anybody who doesn't know my well-established record on this issue, let me be unequivocally clear. A man is a man, and a woman is a woman, and a man cannot become a woman. That said, I also believe, that's what Scripture teaches, what I just said, but I also believe that we treat everybody with dignity.
Right on. That's great. Perfect.
Yeah, much better.
Handle it very well. And that's what you should do. You should treat this person with dignity and make sure that there's a gender-neutral bathroom. Make sure. There are other congressmen, well, women mostly, online trying to virtue signal right now. I'm so sick of these losers. Here's Representative Suzanne, S-U-Z-A-N, Delbene, representing Washington's 1st Congressional District. Wife, mom, grandma, dog mom. She comes out and says Nancy Mace was the first woman to graduate from the Citadel. She knows full well the pain of gender discrimination and the impact of bigoted policies. This is bullying, and she should be ashamed. The pain of gender discrimination. Segregated by sex bathrooms are not discriminatory, madam, which you should know as a member of Congress. They are entirely constitutional and have been upheld. There is absolutely nothing unconstitutional, illegal, or inappropriate about keeping women's bathrooms for women only, biological women. There are no other kinds. And the virtue signaling on the left, look, it already cost you a presidential election, cost you the Senate, led to you not getting the House. Go ahead, take on this issue at your peril. You may think you're on steady ground because now we're not talking about kids. Now we're talking about grown-ups. But you know what grown-ups we're talking about? Women. And we are sick of your shit. I am not alone. I know this is not just a women's issue. I know my male viewers are with me on this too. Now's the time to speak up. Now's the time. If you were silent about it before, we just had a whole presidential election in which the trans issue was the number one motivating issue for swing state voters.
Like I said, that commercial.
Speak up.
Yep.
Use your voice. Drop a line into Speaker Mike Johnson, into your representative to say, no men in women's spaces. Not in their bathrooms, not in their locker rooms, not in their prisons, not in their sports. Period. There's nothing kind about forcing women to endanger themselves and make themselves uncomfortable for the sake of somebody else. This is what McBride himself tried to use to shame us. Sarah, formerly Tim. Oh, I dead named him. He was Tim McBride for 20 years. Then, as a senior at American University, suddenly declared himself a woman. He never became a woman. He became a man dressing as one. He changed his name to Sarah, which I would call him if he were here. But in order to make clear to you what we're dealing with here, what we're talking about, I point out to you, he used to be Tim, now he's Sarah. Sarah's posting on X was, everyday Americans go to work with people who have life journeys different than their own and engage with them respectfully. I hope members of Congress can muster that same kindness. This is what they do. They use words like that to shame us into silence and away from a position that would protect ourselves and our comfort. There is nothing wrong with saying, I am uncomfortable with you, Mr. McBride, coming into my bathroom. And here again, one more point. This is yet another situation that underscores the danger of using preferred pronouns. How can you say she cannot come into the women's room? How can you say that? That doesn't work. Sarah McBride is a he. He may not go into Nancy Mace's bathroom because he is a man. And Nancy Mace's bathroom is for women. That's it. Anybody on Capitol Hill have any questions? You can email me.
So there you go. Once again, the whole point of today's episode is just to kind of highlight the fact that it was, excuse me. Man, jeez, sorry about that. The whole point of today's episode was to just sort of highlight the fact that it was really going to eventually happen at some point or another. There was going to be somebody elected to Congress that was going to be identified as this or that. And here we are. We're there. Now it's going to be a topic that is not going to be, whatever hearings that this person is going to be put on to, whatever they decide they want this transgender congresswoman, congressman, whatever you want to call her, to be involved in. It was already brought up in just about every hearing when it comes to minorities that they have to speak up for on the left, that they always want to, put front and center as these people are all victims, and we need to be understanding and respectful. And yeah, but we also need to remember what kinds of dangers come with this kind of ideology as well, and that this isn't the kind of thing that you just flout around as something that is as a net positive. There's nothing about this that should be looked at as if it's because it's always thrown around. You're so brave, and it's so. Look, the idea of bravery around this idea, especially in today's society, is like, I'm sorry, you have a whole political party that are essentially laying down at the feet, at the altar of transgenderism. There's nothing brave about it anymore, because they know that they have this entire political party there to basically say, no, this person's completely and totally, it's you're all the ones who are wrong. You guys are all the ones that are bigoted and evil. And I will just say in the cases where, someone, because there have been cases, although, it's usually, unfortunately, a case where someone in a bar who's had too much to drink, and so has the other individual involved, and there gets to be a little going on, and once that starts happening, they find out, oh shit, that's not supposed to be there. And in those cases, sometimes I will say, yes, there's been cases where people have been horrifically beat to death because of them finding out that that they look like a woman, but they are not a woman. But once again, I'm sorry, when you normalize this shit and you make it seem like there's nothing wrong with that, it's totally fine. And as a matter of fact, they even go so far as to say, if you are a man and you're not attracted to transgender women, meaning men that become women, if you're not attracted to them, then you're gay, or there's something wrong with you because you don't find that attractive. No, I'm sorry. No, that does not mean that. As a matter of fact, in most cases, it means that you're just normal and can see the differences between men and women. And it kind of proves the point of, only in very select, rare cases is there someone that seems like they actually sincerely, truly believe that this is the way that their life should go. This is the way that works for them. And hey, more power to them. I got nothing against those people. As a matter of fact, the process for them, and as I described at the beginning, is definitely, they go about it the right way, and they should be thought of as in a totally different category than people like we're talking about now, because there's a world of difference. And one of the biggest differences is you can tell by the way that they present themselves and how they do not want, you don't hear stories about them wandering into bathrooms and just ripping their clothes off and, exposing themselves to the world. They don't want to expose themselves. That's one of the main differences. They feel the humility that normal people would feel when in a situation where you're vulnerable and you've got, no clothes on. I mean, that's natural to feel that way. It's not natural to go into a place with a bunch of strangers and feel comfortable taking your clothes off, unless you're some sick weirdo that has a completely different agenda in mind. And that's not what. Hey, Eddie Madison. Once again, you showed up at the end, man. Although it's my fault. I'm late, so I'll take the blame on this one. Sorry about that. But yeah, good to see you, man. I'm glad you stopped in. But either way, there's just, as I was saying, there's nothing about those people that is unusual about being reserved. You see those people, they don't even really want to talk about the procedure that much. Now, recently, they felt like, many of them felt like they've had to come out and explain it, because when they talk about the process for them, how long it is, how arduous it is, how difficult the process is, and the way your family will react is sometimes kind of up in the air. It's like you get the picture from people like that they're not expecting special treatment. They're not expecting that this is going to be easy, and they're not even 100% sure that this is the right thing for them, but they know that they're under such immense psychological pain at the moment that they need to do something. And so they go through the motions like everyone else would under any normal circumstance where there's some sort of psychiatric disorder or something like that. That makes total sense. That's not what we're talking about, though. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about the kind of people that are going to broadcast to the world their gender and their gender identity, and that they hope that they'll be treated with respect, and it's meant to stir up. It's meant to stir up the people that they know are going to be lined up to get in line and defend them based on their political agenda, and that's pretty much the way that it works out. It has nothing to do with anything except for because if this was really about something that was difficult and painful and hard to deal with, you wouldn't be willing to talk about it at every turn, in every sentence, and every time you get interviewed to bring the subject up. If this was something that was really traumatic and difficult for you, people don't talk about those things. It's hard for them to open up about those things. They're not just willing to talk about them as soon as you mention, so you're in Congress, how does it feel? Well, since I'm transgender, that's not the first thing they bring up. It'd be something totally different, like I've worked all my life at doing this and this, and I never imagined I'd be actually able to make it to the United States. And then maybe it'd be a question brought up by someone, like a reporter or something, and then they'd finally make mention about, well, I mean, it is interesting to note that they'd make some kind of modest kind of request to it. And there's nothing wrong with modesty. You don't have to be, there's a difference between feeling some sort of hatred and revulsion towards yourself and being so full of your own ego that you expect everyone to drop down to their knees and kneel at the altar that is the altar of transgenderism. And it's just so that's really probably the biggest differential between, because I don't want to I don't want to go through the whole show without saying anything about the people that genuinely go through this sort of thing, and also the people that go through it and find out that they were duped. In particular, if you look up Chloe Cole, who's talked to Jordan Peterson, and she's testified before Congress. Young girl around age 13 was put on hormone blockers at age 14 or 15, had a double mastectomy, so both her breasts removed, and she had been, she'd been taking testosterone, lots of very high levels of testosterone, and there was a huge change in her mood. There was a huge change in her physical appearance and her voice, her things that you wouldn't think about if you're a younger person, and things that you wouldn't be anticipating if you were feeling like you needed to have some sort of procedure done that would help you out with your self-image or whatever. And it's absolutely heartbreaking to listen to her. I will warn, there's some pretty graphic and disturbing detail that's discussed, but it is kind of important to at least hear it, because this is a girl who was sort of slowly convinced at age 12 or so that this was what she should do, and it's just the way that she was kind of assembly lined into the whole process is so unforgivable, and now, as someone who's who's detransitioned and tried to go back to being as close to the person that she was as she can possibly go, she's still left with the scars. She's still left with wounds that aren't healing properly, and she's also left with the realization now that she's getting older that she might not ever be able to have kids, and that, you know, so there's very real fears that she may have made a decision early on in her life that will have prevented her from achieving some of the most important things that she wants to achieve with her life. And so they don't tell you about that part. They want you to stay as far away from that part as you possibly can. But people like that, and people like that have been through it, you will find when they talk, they have no hostility or anger or any kind of harsh feelings towards people that are going through the process now. What she says is that she hopes that they go through it with someone that actually cares about their well-being and does it the right way, does it the way that they're supposed to do it when they are actually thinking about the care of the patient and not just how big of a paycheck they're going to get. And that's the main difference, is that because the fact that people would even use children in this way is just despicable. They played this video, and I'll just close on this just to show you what kind of... I don't have the video. Maybe I can find it and bring it up at some point. But this shows you everything you need to see when you see this video. They have this doctor who is a surgeon discussing the kinds of care that they do on minors at this hospital that he works at, and describing in detail to, I think it was a podcast he was on, describing the process, describing the types of procedures they do, describing the types of children that they get and the age ranges, and also not just children, that they also do procedures on adults too, but with children they discuss, you know, and it really is, the way this guy talks, it's despicable. It's absolutely disgusting. It's just, because at one point he even kind of hints at the idea that it's exciting. It's exciting time right now to be learning through trial and error what works, what doesn't work. I'm sorry, learning through trial and error on children. So you're admitting that you're making lab rats out of children to experiment on them for your sick transgender surgery cult that you want to find out what works and what doesn't. And the reason that this is an interesting part is that the Democrats protest entirely to them showing this video at all. They insist on a vote. They have the vote. It passes. And as they're about to play the video, all the Democrats walk out. They'll leave the room. They play the video. The video's over. They all come walking back in. So, yeah, there you go. It shows you exactly where their head's at. They don't want to know. They bury their head in the sand. They're going to support this anyway. But they don't want to know. Because they don't want to consciously be aware of what kind of bullshit they actually are supporting. I mean, you can't get any more obvious than that. You won't even sit and listen to the kind of absolute demonic levels of fucking harm you're doing to children? And you're going to push the policies anyway? You're not even going to sit down and listen to it. It was one of the most shocking things I ever saw. That literally the entire half of Congress gets up, walks out of the room. It's amazing. It's amazing. And of course, they somehow knew exactly when the video was over, or somebody, like maybe one of the staffers informed them or whatever. But I mean, and then they all come walking back in, like you know, and at that point, the Republicans are all like, "This is ridiculous." Like, you don't even want to watch this. You won't even sit down and watch it. First, you protest even showing it because you know you guys are so pro censorship all the time. But now at the same time, you won't even watch the video because you know how bad this is. You don't want to talk about it, but you know. I mean, you can't you can't avoid this if you're promoting it. You will know at least some of the most egregious situations, but you're just going to minimize it. You're going to try and minimize it every time. Well, unfortunately, we're past the point of minimization, and now it's going to be staring you in the face every single day with this new member of Congress. And if you think that more exposure is the right answer to this subject, and more hysteria over the subject is the right way to go, well, hey, have at it then. Best of luck to you, because seems like to me, when we get down to it, the more people know, the more they reject it. It happened in Britain. It's happened here with several states, and it's going to come to a point where it's eventually going to happen to every sane person in this country that, no, sorry, you don't just get to do this to kids. So anyway, that'll do it for me for today. Once again, sorry for the late show, guys. I will do my best to be on time tomorrow. I really hope I finally make it this time. But as I said, I will at least make sort of a concession right now that I'm going to make sure, if it's in my power, if I'm not in a hospital, in a coma or something, I will at least put the video out every day that I'm supposed to be on. So you can expect a video every day except for Sunday, and eventually, hopefully, that day too. But for now, apologies for the video being late. But thanks again for watching. I will be with you hopefully tomorrow at the right time. I won't even say for sure this time, but hopefully. But either way, I will let you guys know. If you guys aren't following me on X, you guys can follow me on X at FrameAdvan. And I will at least be posting on there when things like this come up, like when you can expect the show to be coming out, and kind of keep up to date on what's actually happening if something changes or unexpected goes on. So, yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you for the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves, have a fantastic night, and I will talk to you then. Peace.
Yeah, I can't read it. There's no words on it.
Okay. Sure.
There's no words there. To play us out. What does that mean? To play us out. What is
for credits.